Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on April 27th, 2023 for the Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee meeting for the Township of Wilmot. Before I start the meeting and kick us off, I'd like to just do a brief introduction of who's present in the room. For our committee members today, we have Carl Zaire, Dave Jaworski, Rosita C., Teresa Bish, and Ting Ting Su. In terms of the parties involved for the MECAC application, we have Mike Rice as the applicant and Barry Wolf as the respondent. And with respect to township staff present today, we have myself as manager of legislative services and municipal clerk for the township, as well as secretary to the committee. We have Chad Curtis, our deputy clerk for the township of Wilmot. We also have Stephen O'Melia, a solicitor for the township and for this committee present as well. Two of our members, or two folks today, are attending virtually. You'll notice that we have Ting Ting Su on Zoom, as well as Stephen O'Melia. Moving on with our agenda, I'd like to do the territorial acknowledgement. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made with Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterized our collective responsibility to each other and to Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant, and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, work together as a community. Thank you. I'd like to ask the committee members if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, there are no minutes of the previous meeting, and we'll move on to our first action item, which is the election of our chair and vice chair of this committee. I will ask the committee members if they have any nominations for chair of the committee. Yep. Mr. Zaire? Sorry, yes, there is a button on your...
Okay, thank you. I would nominate Dave Jaworski as chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Rosita. All in favor? All opposed? That carries. I will now ask for a motion for, a nomination for vice chair.
I would like to nominate Carl Zaire to be the vice chair, please.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. So the motion on the floor at the moment, just as a whole, is we'll do that Dave Jaworski be appointed as chair of the Municipal Compliance Audit Committee, and that Carl Zaire be appointed as vice chair of the Municipal Compliance Audit Committee, and that the appointments be made exclusively for consideration of application Wilmot 2022-01. All in favor? Great, thank you. And all opposed? And that carries. At this time, I will ask Chair Jaworski to join me up here in our chair station. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to beautiful township of Wilmot. I think there's no better place to get corn than Hurley's Markets. And even though I was mayor of Waterloo, I highly suggest that everybody head out to Hurley's Markets to get that beautiful peaches and cream sweet corn. And it's right by my house. And just a wonderful place. And I'd just like to thank the clerk's team for getting us here today, getting us all up and operating. Thank you to the Township of Wilmot. And to our applicants here today. I think what we all want is just a nice, respectful discussion, a nice, fair discussion. And I think that at the end of the day, our goal today is to hear that everybody goes, you know, I feel like I was heard. And I think that's all we can ask for today. We'll see how far we get. But with that, I need to start at... Okay. We are moving on to the adoption of the Election Compliance Audit Committee terms of reference. Any discussions or questions? Can we put a motion on the floor for that the terms of reference as attached to the April 27th, 2023 agenda package be adopted? Could I have a mover and a seconder? And if anybody on video, Ting Ting, just put up your hand and visually, and I'll be able to see it most easily that way. Do I have a mover for that? Moved by Rosita, seconded by Ting Ting. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That, I think, is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to the adoption of the Election Compliance Audit Committee Rules of Procedure. Before any discussions or questions, let's put the motion on the floor. May I have a mover and a seconder that the Rules of Procedure as attached to the April 27th, 2023 agenda package be adopted? I'll look for a mover. Moved by Teresa, seconded by Carl. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Moving on to item 6, we are here to hear about application number Wilmot 2022-01. Applicant is Mike Rice. Registered third-party advertisers Barry Wolf. And we have until, I think, May 2nd, 2023 to make a decision on this. Before I ask the applicant to make their submission to the committee, I do want to express that the Municipal Compliance Audit Committees welcomes and encourages all parties to comment on matters of interest to them. However, the parties are cautioned that any derogatory or inappropriate remarks may constitute slander and could potentially lead to legal action against them. If such comments are made, the delegate will not be permitted to continue speaking, and the comments will not be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. In accordance with the rules of procedure, today's meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be published on the Township website. Any party speaking, please say your name and municipality in which they live. If the committee secretary, is that you? Is the clerk, requires contact information, he or the deputy clerk may come and request that information before you leave the chambers. Just continue reading here, the notice. The notice of meeting. This meeting of the Municipal Compliance Audit Committee has been called in response to an application filed by Mike Rice for a compliance audit of the financial statement filed by Barry Wolf for the 2022 municipal election. All parties and the committee received notice of this meeting on April 6, 2023, in accordance with the applicable provisions of the Municipal Elections Act 1996. The committee will consider an application for a compliance audit of a registered third party's election campaign finances received under Section 88.35 of the Municipal Election Act from an elector to determine if the application should be granted or rejected. If granted, the MCAC, this committee, will appoint an auditor, receive and consider the auditor's report, and decide whether legal proceedings should commence or if there are reasonable grounds for the application. Now, with respect to the proceeding orders, the speaking order will be as follows. The applicant, Mike Rice, will be given 10 minutes to make their submission. Presumably we'll have questions after that? Okay, good. That's good. The respondent, Barry Wolf, will be given 10 minutes to make their presentation. Committee members may ask questions of anyone speaking today, township staff, or the solicitor present for the committee, for the purpose of receiving clarifications on the submission or any documents or other evidence tendered. Following the submission by both parties and questions by the committee may reserve its decision and deliberate in private today or at a later time or date. As previously stated, the committee must decide on this matter no later than May 2nd, 2023. The committee will provide a brief written reason for the decision it will make. The committee secretary will provide a copy of the decision to both parties and members of the committee. Do any members of the committee have any questions related to the procedures for today's meeting? Seeing none, let's get started. First up is the application submitted by Mike Rice with respect to the financial statement filed by Barry Wolf. I will ask the applicant, Mr. Mike Rice, to make their 10-minute submission, and we'll go from there. So welcome. Does he come to the podium or just speaking there? Okay. And there's just a little button on there to get you started. Welcome, Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, committee, members, and members of the public. Thank you for your time and consideration of the application that is before you. My name is Mike Rice. I live in New Hamburg, and I've lived in Wilmot since I was of voting age. Along with my wife, we have raised a family here and have been blessed with 3 amazing grandkids. It's hard to believe our eldest grandchild will be able to vote in a few short years. I believe this past election may have been the first time a third-party advertiser was approved to participate in a municipal election in the township of Wilmot. After looking up what the role of a third-party advertiser was, the plain language third-party advertiser's guide outlined a variety of things that didn't add up for me. These observations were presented in the application and notes to this committee. The guide is clear that the intent of this type of election advertising is specific to non-candidates who choose to promote, support for, or opposition to any candidate or candidates to persuade voters to vote in a certain way. The registrant appears to have not complied with the rules that third-party advertisers must follow, which calls into question the financial details that were submitted to the registrant, by the registrant, excuse me. After you get to a certain age, you think about what the generation, or what our generation has made better and what messes we're leaving for my grandkids' generation to fix. Whatever needs to be fixed in their lifetime will most likely rely on something as simple as being able to vote in a fair election free of undue influence. Continued trust in our election process is something I'm sure they'd appreciate as well. I trust that this committee, in its collective wisdom, will see past broad assumptions and confusing interpretations leading to repudiation of obligations. This, as well as sticking to relevant facts and regulations that only deal with registered third-party advertisers, will ensure this hearing can proceed diligently. In addition to financial compliance, I am hopeful that this body will consider the consequences to public trust by ensuring that basic election regulations are honored, upheld, implemented, and consistently as required. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rice, sticking within like 2 or 3 minutes. Bonus marks for that. Do I have any questions from the committee members? First up is Mr. Carlzaire.
Thank you. Mr. Rice, you had mentioned, I think one of the comments you said there, and certainly within the documentation that you provided, if I recall the exact words or fairly closely, that a third-party advertiser really was doing this if it was persuading voters to support one or more candidates. Is that the essence of your comment?
Through the chair, that is what I read in the municipal guide, yes.
Okay. Did the applicant, or the respondent, did the respondent in the articles or in the advertisement that we have seen, in the documentation you presented, did it specify any support for any councillor nominees?
Through the chair, I think that's where it gets a little confusing, is because it focuses on promoting a website that discusses candidate preferences or opposition. But without the website, the print ad would have been meaningless. So there's 2 parts, and there's 2 pieces of advertising that I think has to be considered.
Can you clarify that?
In what sense?
Well, you said that it was an advertisement, first
Yes.
of all, but it was not necessarily promoting any particular candidate or a group of candidates, correct?
It discusses 15 candidates in the headline. It talks about points. I believe I have it in my package. You can actually see the ad. And it has 2 methods to direct people to a website. One is a URL, and the other is a QR code, which I believe, do you know what a QR code is?
Of course.
Yeah, just want to make sure. And so obviously the website was the direction that this ad was meant to take people. So,
and therefore, as a consequence of that, did the URL and where you referred to comment on any specific candidate?
Candidate and candidates, plural, yeah.
individually, as to not just the names, but did it support or detract from any particular candidate?
Correct. There was 3 incidences that I actually included in my notes.
Perhaps we can come back to that after we've heard from the respondent. I think that we need to get a clarification on that particular matter.
Thanks. Further questions from committee members?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify, like you said, there's some financial compliance question. In what way can you expand it for us so we can discuss?
Through the chair, because the website is a relevant part of this, he directs people to it. There were components that were not accounted for, like web hosting fees and so forth. So those are related. There's also an aspect of the financial report that references fees from the Land Registry Office. I'm not sure how that applies to purchasing advertisement or web hosting. So there's some confusion, I think, just as a general Joe, that I didn't quite get. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions from committee members? Seeing none at this time, thank you, Mr. Rice, and we're going to move on. Next up, I have the financial statement dated October 3rd, 2022, submitted by Mr. Barry Wolf, and the responding materials dated April 14th, 2023, submitted by Mr. Barry Wolf. I'll ask the respondent, Barry Wolf, to make their submission up to 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dave. My name is Barry Wolf. My wife and I have lived in New Hamburg during the 1980s, where we brought up our 2 newborn children. We brought them home in 1981 and 83. That makes my son 42 on Tuesday. He's going to be a VP at Bruce Nuclear. So we're doing really well. New Hamburg breeds good stock. I was a teacher at Forest Glen PS for 10 years and a member of the Optimist Club as we raised our children. My wife and I subsequently lived in 2 other communities, up in the Bruce and back in Strathroy, before moving back to Wilmot Township in 2020. We wished to be closer to a grandson in his earlier years. You know how grandmas are, right? Grandpa follows willingly. In Strathroy, I had a website, www.rememberourvets.ca, that recounted the lives of the veterans associated with that committee. Where source information could be found, the site recounted where they lived, sometimes with a photo of their house, where they worked, specific jobs they had, the schools they attended, sports they played, their family relationships prior to them leaving for war. Often by using official battalion war diaries and other historic records, I researched where their battalion traveled, significant battles that the veteran participated in, and where the battalion was on the date and time of the veteran's death. In some cases, I could present a map and photos of the exact location where the veteran was killed. The site is a compilation of their lives. It allows viewers to get today to connect with fellow citizens long dead. It allows us today to compare our lifestyle to the life challenges our veterans endured before they sacrificed their all. This site is a work in progress. After moving to Wilmot, I started another website, which has a similar focus. It's called thisiswilmot.ca. This site records my research so far about Wilmot veterans. Over time, I've added other drop-down menus with my research on topics that I believe might be of interest to my fellow residents of Wilmot. Things such as Wilmot's physical origins and transitions over the millions, the various peoples who have preceded us here and their lifestyles, current affairs topics such as affordable housing, medical services, and eventually I will be adding another drop-down about homelessness. Homelessness is a challenging topic to get factual, current data about, as it's constantly evolving situation. But it's in my plans. I eventually added a drop-down menu with factual, well-researched information about all candidates in the 22 municipal council election. In other words, the site is a compilation of factual research on issues which are of interest to me and I believe have an impact on our lifestyles, how we perceive our individual styles of life in relation to the styles of life of others around us, our fellow citizens. This is a lifestyle site, is the way I characterize it. I placed an ad to promote the site in the Wilmot Tavistock Gazette without incident. It appeared. The New Hamburg Independent ad salesman asked me whether I was a third-party advertiser. I'd never considered it. And no time did he say that being a registered third-party advertiser was a requirement before the paper would place the ad. It was just a question. To my embarrassment, I did not check with the MEA to see whether my site did in fact require that I be a third-party advertiser. I registered simply as a cautionary act just in case. I was just doing what I thought would be right. As it turns out, the registration was not required for my site, as its content was an equitable application of specific criteria to all candidates without prejudice. The content of the site itself was factual. The landing page on the site lists the sources of data and invites readers to submit evidence of any potential inaccuracies with the statement, quote, "If there's any data which can be proven inaccurate, not just subject to a difference of opinion or interpretation, then you are invited to contact the webmaster at thisiswilmot@gmail.com. That is my email content. If documented evidence can be provided, then the webmaster will make any appropriate corrections. The data is as factually accurate as the webmaster's human capacities permit," unquote. I heard no challenge from the applicant nor his candidate daughter disputing any of the content or its factual accuracy. The irony is, it was the registration itself that is being used for an audit application. The Township Clerk cooperatively forwarded a copy of Report ILS 2022-23 titled Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee Appointments. On page 2, under the heading Background, it states, quote, "The Act requires the establishment of a compliance committee to consider applications from an eligible voter who believes, on reasonable grounds, that a candidate or third-party registered has contravened a provision of this Act relating to election campaign finances. Point 1, the applicant must deal with election campaign finances only. 2, only is my word. 2, it must be raised on reasonable grounds. Upon analysis of the details section of the submission of the application, I was able to identify approximately 26 separate items, allegations, some of which were conveniently grouped by the applicant under headings. I guess I should thank the applicant for so extensively clarifying the fact that my site does not align with the requirements for third-party advertisers as specified in the Act. Under his heading, negligent to comply with all third-party advertisers' requirements, including opposing or supporting an individual candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot, unquote, he quotes an MEA reference, quote, "The print ad headline references 15 candidates in Wilmot's election rather than an individual candidate. I suggest that a reasonable person, that is a person using reason, would logically conclude immediately that the drop-down menu on the site does not promote, support, or oppose a candidate or election questions. It does use public sources to gather publicly available factual information that was considered in whether or not it applied to all candidates without prejudice. The definition of third-party advertisers' advertisement is an advertisement in a broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing a candidate, or a yes or no answer to a question. As it turns out, the content of my site does not require that I be a third-party advertiser. It does not have the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing any single candidate or any group of candidates. It is generic, about all 15 candidates. I did not, therefore, in fact, need to submit a financial report, as it was unnecessary to submit Form 7 in the first place. It is my conclusion. In spite of the fact that the applicant should reasonably have been immediately aware that the ad was not really a third-party ad, as it did not align with any of the specified criteria, as he discovered, here we all are. The documents I previously submitted to the committee all put forth the following argument. By definition, the ad never aligned with the conditions defining a third-party advertiser. I was never a third-party advertiser, in fact, and thus I should not have applied as such in the first place. My inadvertent error. Thus, there would have been no need for a financial report. If I'd known that, I've never applied to the clerk on a Form 7, or if I discovered it in time, I would have withdrawn it per clause 88.615, 88.616, but I didn't know. So I missed the formal withdrawal deadline. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Doesn't change the reality that here we all are. Any error in applying in the first place was inadvertent. I plead naivety at best and at worst possible negligence to research the definition of the MEA myself. I instead reacted proactively to an innocent question from a newspaper employee. There must be some irony in here somewhere. My being focused on accurate research and factual reporting on my website and then accepting guidance on its face from one person who I perceived as possibly being knowledgeable on the matter. I'm mostly embarrassed for making that assumption, to be honest with you, through you, Chair Dave. Conclusion. After receiving this audit application by the applicant and reading the MEA in some detail, I thank him for bringing the fact that I am not a third-party advertiser to light. I trust that the Audit Committee will recognize that my intent in publishing a drop-down on my 22 election on my lifestyle website was for the public good. It was intended to provide accurate information about all candidates without prejudice, so that viewers could make their own conclusions. I trust that the Audit Committee will recognize that my intent was to share that information as widely as practical with Wilmot voters by advertising its existence in 2 newspapers. I trust that the Audit Committee will consider that naivety, as embarrassing it is to me now, led to my inadvertently submitting a notice of registration Form 7. There was never any nefarious intent. Any error was inadvertent. It is my opinion that for the Audit Committee to reject this application would be for the public good. If the committee members have any questions for clarification or other facts, I'm pleased to respond. Thank you, Chair Dave.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolf. I'll just look to my committee members to see if anybody has their hand up for further questions. First up is Carl Zaire.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, from the first Mr. Rice's initial comments and you're acknowledging that there was a drop-down menu there. Can you comment just a little bit more in terms of the content? You've already done some of that, but in terms of information that you gathered and included in there, was it or was it not for the support of a particular candidate?
The website was created on, as I submitted in my preliminary document, on rumors going about, word of mouth, over the back fence talk. You know how that stuff goes, people talk, being politicians, you know what I'm talking about. And some of it is concerning about what's going on in the 2018-22 council. And being new to the municipality, I said, well, okay, this is rumors. I'm looking for facts. Like, I'm a retired principal. You work on facts. There's information, there's truth, there's false, there's interpretation. And I wanted to confirm, so I did the research. The sources I used are outlined on the landing page on the website. I used nomination papers from the previous election, so I knew who the candidates, all 15 candidates, who were signing their nomination papers. Trying to identify any names that would jump out at you for whatever reason. I noticed in the nomination papers that candidates were nominating each other. There was a link, and I drew the diagram on one of the pages of who was nominating each other. So you could see that there were some connections. And there were basically two connections. Those that were from the existing outgoing, hoping to be elected candidates, and new candidates. So there were some mutual support for each other. I thought that would be of interest to know, for people to know that maybe there are quasi-parties in existence. I looked at the nomination papers to see who else was nominating them, and I noticed that there was a group that was being nominated by very wealthy developers who had special interests, vested financial interests within the township. It's always interesting information to know. It may or may not go to motive. I leave that, it's factually presented. It's for the reader, the voter, to decide. In fact, I think there was an article in one of the papers this week about a similar concern at the provincial level. I looked at follow the money. It's usually a good principle to find out alliances, allegiance, direction, and motives. So I went to Land Registry Office to check who was the registered owner of the property for the 15 candidates. And I was going with the interest night, hoping that people have a mortgage or they don't, they own it outright, they would be registered in their own name or whatever. And I found that in a couple of cases, a candidate had a financial support from a very wealthy individual in the community. Was apparently, according to the Land Registry Office, granted 35% ownership in a property based on an increase in the value of the property since the purchaser originally acquired it. So they acquired it for, say, $65. It was appraised at $100 now, $35 in equity. That 35% was transferred to somebody else, and it appeared to be free. Interesting information. Not opposing, whatever, just good background information to know where it's going. So, in most cases, nothing popped up, but wherever anything popped up, here it is. So I wasn't supporting or opposing. That was for the reader to conclude. I used a variety of other resources. So I also sent out a survey questionnaire to each of the candidates early on, asking them specific questions on items of current interest in the election. Where did they stand? In other words, it was another opportunity for them to get their message out. And I quoted them directly as they submitted it. And before I put it live, I allowed any who had submitted a document to proof it, to confirm that that's what, in fact, they had said. Not all candidates responded. And that was indicated on the website too. If you go to that page, you can see all of the candidates listed, and there is or there isn't responses from those candidates. I see my website as a compilation of research that is publicly available to anybody if they want to take the time and are willing to invest a little bit of money for for example, access documents. Most people don't. Most people believe what they read. They trust people. It's human nature. We trust each other. That's what this whole thing is based on, right? I had a conversation with a minister of education many, many years ago, and I was a negotiator for a party of people, and I was asking them, I said, you know, the school board is given a certain amount of money for funding junior kindergarten, and they're not spending it on that. They're spending it on this. How do you ensure that they do that? And his answer was, at that time, jaw-dropping to me. He says, 95% of the regulations and rules in society are enforced by each other. So if you've got a problem, look into it. So I respect Mr. Rice because he's got an issue. Personally, I think it's unfounded, but he's doing what we
Why don't
do.
we make sure we stick to the answer to the response to Mr. Carl Zaire to see what if he's getting what he needs. Hold on.
Yeah.
So what have I missed, sir?
So what I'm trying to get at here is not all of the detail, but whether or not the information that was on the website, this drop-down website, was your opinion, or was it fact based on the research?
It was fact based on research, and any place where I had a subjective interpretation of the facts, I stated that.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, any other further questions? I'll just look to Ting Ting to make sure I'm not missing you. Any questions, or Teresa or Rosita? Thank you. Just one question from me regarding the, if I refer to page 170 of our package from the clerk, which is the audit financial statement, just looking at the fundraising activities. This was primarily funded by yourself, except for it looks like $150 of a contribution.
I had two donors of less than $100 each.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that was primarily funded by yourself, as stated there.
Yes.
I'll give the last call for questions for Mr. Wolf.
Just one more, sir.
Yeah, please go ahead. Are you over to Mr. Rice now?
No, I'm...
Oh, okay, sorry. Please go ahead.
Sorry, there was one other question I had. On your report, the financial statement, the reference to the Service Ontario Land Registry Office fees, was that's what you were referring to earlier on when you went to get your research as to who had owned properties and that sort of thing. Is that correct?
I considered it an expense.
No, I just want to know.
So yes,
just want to know if that's what it was referring to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I do not see any further questions for Mr. Wolf. Thank you very much. But back to Mr. Zaire, because what I have on my list here, referring to the clerk, is that we have an opportunity to delegate in private following these questioning. So I'll just turn it back over to Mr. Zaire to see if you have any further questions you said you might have for Mr. Rice before we go deliberate for a period. Okay. I'll refer to the clerk. Okay. As long as we follow my rules and that, but if you could, short information. How about we say that, Mr. Rice?
Thank you, through the chair. The first question from the member asks about was there defined support or opposition, and this was provided in my notes, but I think maybe at this point it's important to read it, if that's okay, through the chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. The third-party registrant states one incumbent candidate might lose their seat, because they are facing a positive, impressive candidate. This endorsement alone demonstrates at least support for one candidate, and this is on the website. The third-party registrant declares 3 incumbents do not speak for me on these social issues, and goes on to declare, "This is not leadership, it is hubris. This clearly speaks to promoting opposition to certain candidates." The use of information acquired from the Land Registry Office included as an expense in the registrant's supplied financial statement as a fee was not applied without bias, and it was just recently stated that he posted about 2 candidates out of the 15 that were promoted in the print advertisement. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for being concise, Mr. Rice. And then to Mr. Wolf, just in fairness, any further information, or if not, that's fine.
The website deals with candidates, not a candidate as specified in the third party. And as I said, if there is any personal interpretation, it was stated as such. It was not a promotion of any particular candidate. It was not in opposition to any candidate. It was factual data as I had researched it and reported it. As a honorable citizen of the community, I thought I was acting within the bounds of appropriate behavior. Having been a professional, retired professional, I very closely aligned with those things. So that was the standard that guided me, and I think I fit within those bounds, and this application does not apply.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf, and I'll just take a quick pause with my own committee members, just make sure there's no hands up or anything. If there are no further questions at this time, I'll ask the committee to please move to the retiring room to deliberate. To the parties in the room, if the committee decides that it needs more time to deliberate beyond today, the committee will resume the meeting and advise the parties to that effect. The meeting will then be adjourned until the committee is able to deliberate. So I'll just look to the clerk. Does that mean that at this point the delegates can go and we're going to be in private from now on?
We can actually ask if the delegates would, or if the parties would like to stay. You're welcome to, and once the committee is met, we'll just make sure if you need more time or what the committee thinks you need, and then we'll advise both parties. So if a decision could be reached today, then we'll let both parties know what time and all those kind of good details. But at this point, it would just be prudent to have the committee at least gather in private and have that brief discussion, and then we will at least let those viewing online as well know what the committee's intentions are.
Okay, so by my clock here, it's 10:45. I think we can commit to the people here that we'll be out by 11:30.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to say we're going to commit to being out by 11:30, plus or minus, but you'll know it's not 4:45 or anything like that. So, okay, thank you both very much, and we'll be back soon. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the Township of Wilmot committee meeting, the Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee meeting. Continuing that, we are just back from a break deliberating on the information that we've received at this time. And we do have the opportunity to report that we have made a decision. So I'll just, I can continue reading out, Chad. That the application received by Mike Rice for a compliance audit of Barry Wolf third-party advertiser in the 2022 municipal election be received, and further, that the Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee for the Township of Wilmot rejects the application by the applicant for the following reasons. The mandate of the committee, in accordance with Section 88.33, Bracket 1, of the Municipal Elections Act 1996 is to consider an application for a compliance audit of a registered third-party advertiser's election campaign finances received under Section 88.35 of the Municipal Election Act from an elector to determine if the application should be granted or rejected. The scope of the committee's powers is to review the financial statements submitted by the third-party advertiser. Having reviewed the financial statements, the written submissions, and considered the deliberations at the April 27th, 2023 Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee meeting, the committee believes that an audit of the financial statement filed by Barry Wolf would not provide significant additional information to the committee and/or the public. The committee highlights that portions of the complaints did not relate to financial matters and are not of a financial nature, but were a matter of form and do not support concerns relating to the financial statement filed by the third-party advertiser. It's important to remember that this stage of the proceedings is to determine if an investigation should be ordered by the committee. Upon reviewing all evidence presented, the committee believes that an audit of the financial statements of the third-party advertiser is not warranted. And so that is the decision. You can get a further copy of this from the clerk's office at I'll turn over to the clerk for a moment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we will. Okay. Do you want to do that? Sorry.
Yeah, I read that out, but that is actually just a motion for the committee to consider. Do I have anybody at the committee who would like to move that motion? Moved by Mayor Zaire. Moved by Carl Zaire, seconded by Rosita C. Any discussion or comments? I'll look for hands. All those in favor? And just calling ting ting, that is confirmed unanimously by the committee. I will now turn it over to the clerk for further commentary. Thank you, Mr. Zaire.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just in terms of procedure, what will happen next is I myself, as Secretary to the committee, will issue the decision to both parties involved and to the committee, and that'll be in writing, and you'll receive that most likely by the end of this week. At earliest, it'll be next week, but probably tomorrow you'll receive that, and it'll give you any next steps in terms of appeals if that's what you so choose to do. Okay.
So with that, as we move towards adjournment, I would like to thank the applicant, the respondent, and particularly the clerk's office for getting all the information together for us, making sure we had the support of Mr. O'Melia, Steve's job as the solicitor. Thank you for the township, and that we had great deliberations. Thank you to the committee members for serving here today, and to making sure that we were able to follow the particular process as seen. And thank you all very much. And with that, I don't think I need a motion to adjourn. We're just adjourned. I missed that. Thank you.